Hello, and once again welcome back to my Let's Build series of the University from the Name of the Wind. Now that we've finished mains, I'm moving on to building Mews, the lodging on the campus where students will be staying. I started off by using the major description from the novel, which is that the Mews had a circular central hub with 8 wings radiating in each direction, so it looked like a compass rose. Using this design, I used wool to fashion out how I was going to build it. I removed one of the hubs as it was going to be the entranceway and figured out exactly how I was going to angle them because of the diagonal plane that works on Minecraft. You can see me just filling in the base and just getting a general idea how it works, transforming the terrain so that I can actually start building. Now, for Mews, I kind of wanted to use a really bright building, but brighter than any I'd used before. So I looked into using quartz as my main material, using different bases as a first decision, but in the end I decided to use the chiseled quartz blocks for the foundation of the material and for each ceiling to create a really nice textured border, and using quartz blocks for the main sections of wall. See me just whizzing around and just transforming the wool into quartz using the wool edit tool. I kept the wool in the centre so I'd know exactly where the epicenter of this building is, and it took me quite a while to build up the Mews due to the diagonal planes again, and because world edit isn't particularly compatible with diagonal plane in its own little way because of how it transforms. However, I was able to use it for the north, south and western wings, though I did accidentally paste one in one cell too deep. So I just corrected that. And from there I started thinking about how the room's going to be set up. Now, Mews was used for mass accommodation, so I imagined that the bottom floor, which was going to be the cheapest one, would have bunk beds, and I tried thinking of how I was going to do the bunk beds, as in Minecraft you can't stack beds on top of each other unless you put 2 blocks, stick a bed on top of those blocks, remove the blocks and then stick a bed underneath. But had I wanted to do a more sophisticated kind of bed using doors and ladders to make it look a bit better, I would have needed a lot more space and made each of the channels a bit wider. Unfortunately, because of the limitations, I had to stick with just having double bunk beds on the bottom. I also added in some chests, workbenches, which look like drawers in some instances, and also some ladders on the walls just to flesh out the room a bit more. I also added a few windows into the sides, though I am going to add in more windows towards the end of the build, as Mews really needs to have quite a few, as described in the book, and because of the way it's designed, there's going to be very little natural light on the bottom floors if I don't add those windows in. Now I was just messing around with the entranceways for each of the bedrooms, because as again on the diagonal planes it's impossible to put a door down unless you want to have 2, then I had to consider how that would work, so I decided to have it as an open archway instead, and that on the bottom floor you wouldn't really have that much privacy as you are getting the cheapest accommodation as a student. I then filled in the ceilings of each with the next floor and thought about how I was going to do the central column, or rather the entranceway to each one. I thought about doing a pillar, but decided upon a main staircase which would reach the first and the second floors, and I thought that this would add a greater amount of variation to the build rather than the winding staircase which I'd used before in the bell tower and in various other buildings on mains. I used a variation of quartz pillars, chisel quartz blocks for the borders, and then the quartz blocks themselves to build up the floor and also the walls of each of these sections. I was really quite happy with the effect that the staircase had in it, as it added something quite grand to the building, I felt. On the second floor, on the first floor, I imagined that the students would have a bit more luxury as they're slightly richer maybe, and that they'd have a single bed, no double bunks here, and that they'd be able to afford a little bit more privacy, so I did include doors on some of the rooms, though on the diagonals I left them as they were, maybe they're the cheaper rooms, but mainly because of the hobble design that it can come with the diagonal. I then came around to the front, just added a bit of an archway, which is going to come up and over to the roof, and then built up the second floor of Mews. I also added a single room on its own, just up there in the corner, which I think would be for maybe the caretaker of the building, or perhaps a visiting guest who was particularly prestigious. Now, for the roof, I wanted to ensure that it was all cohesive, but I wasn't sure what block to use. I originally thought about using a really light blue, but unfortunately with the Conquest texture palette there wasn't one, so after experimenting with glass, finding that its transparency wasn't very appealing, I turned to the blue stained clay and came around the entire building. Now, unfortunately, because I decided to start with one of the wings, my measurements for the main dome were off somewhat, so I ended up having to come back, cutting away a bit of it and then restructuring again, so that the glass dome on top, which would allow a little bit of natural lighting down on the main staircase and on the top floor to truly shine through and to also fit. So I was happy with the roof and the general design. I came around to each wing and built those up with the same clay. Unfortunately, because there aren't any stairs for the clay, the roof of Mews does look a little bit rough and a bit chunky, and there's no way for me to really correct this without using a different block, say a stone slab, so I ended up having to leave it as it was, and I still think it looks pretty good despite the limitations of the base game. Now I came round to the front for the one wing that I'd cut off to create a different sort of opening. I really liked the way the archway worked and different stones, and I also added a glass surface on the inside that would block it off as a really unique kind of window entranceway, which I think really suited the character of the building itself. And there we have it. Mews is complete. I fleshed out all of the rooms, and I'm going to cut out a few more windows in just a few moments. But now we need to move on to Mess, where all the students are going to be eating. Now, Mess is quite a short and squat building, I imagine, with a kitchen attached to it. So I didn't want it to be too grand, I wanted it to be quite basic, and hiding in the shadow of Mews. Also, I imagine it to be quite close to the main, so that a student can come out of their lecture and then immediately go and get something to eat nice and quickly. And as it's quite close to the river, it would also be quite easy for the cooks to wash their pots and pans. And just for the chefs, I decided to create a chimney, and I put a fully functioning fire in there, so it's almost like a little furnace or a little kitchen. Came in, and I also installed really long tables and added benches on some of them and singular chairs on others. I used a darker wood at the top of the mess hall so that maybe teachers or really advanced students, prestigious students maybe, can eat in a slightly nicer place away from the rabble. Came around and added in some flags, some boards from the paintings thing at the top of it, just behind these blue staircases. Unfortunately it's not on screen, which I apologise for. And then I just filled in the roof, as I say, a very basic building. I think that's what the purpose of it is. Now, I came around to build hollows for the university, which, as described in the book, was a very simple square building. But unfortunately, it's quite hard to make a small and perfectly square building in Minecraft because of the way the dimensions work, because 2 blocks is the size of a character. To make a true cube, I'd have to go up quite a few blocks. And as you can see here, I'm just experimenting out, but the building ended up being really, really tall, 2 stories in fact. So I ended up cutting that away and deviating from the source material and creating something a bit different. I still wanted hollows to be quite simple, as I thought that having too many grand and big buildings would detract from the overall design. However, I created a lifted stage and set up a crescent table with some stone seating where the masters would be for their interviews. I also created a birchwood stage at the bottom where the students would be standing to audition for the ability to come to the university. Now I ended up putting one of the walls out by a block so I could have a staircase going up the sides so the masters could actually get there, because there are 9 of them, and with the dimensions that I used to create hollows, there wasn't quite enough room for all of the seats and a way to get up to them. I then came out to the back and used fences to set up a foundation where I could put some wool blocks to create a basic curtain. There is the curtain in the painting files, but unfortunately I was struggling to get them to come out and to show themselves, so in the end I just settled for the wooden blocks. Now I did also know that hollows had a lot of stained glass windows in pink. Some of them showing Tecum in a classic pose, standing barefoot in the mouth of his cave, speaking to a group of students. Unfortunately, again because of the scale of Minecraft, it's very hard to create such things, so I ended up just throwing some random stained glass at them, and I'm quite happy with the result. And now we finished the Mews, the mass and the hollows. You can see the basic foundation. I put a few birchwood trees on the outside leading up to it. The lower floor is still quite dark, even with the torches I added in, but the main staircase and the upper floors are quite bright and nicely furnished, I'd say, for all the different students. And then it can come down, have a nice meal in the mess hall, which is quite warmly lit, I must say, and I've also fleshed out the kitchen with all the utensils that I need. And there we have it, another piece of the university complete. I hope you'll join me for the Medica, which is up next. Thank you very much.